So welcome everybody to our biweekly Digital Services Forum call. Today what I'm going to go through is some pretty detailed descriptions of two contributions that I'm going to make to the community, and then talk a little bit more about how we do that on an ongoing basis. So those are the two big goals for today. And then at the end, we'll spend the last few minutes just talking about upcoming content and how we're working towards getting you answers to some of the things you asked for on the last two calls. We did these small surveys. So if today's your first time, we always go through the notes on Zoom. If today's your first time, can you just share your name and your company inside of the chat so that everybody can know it's your first time and we can welcome you to the group? And the other thing I'd like to let you know here, one of the resources, and Rod, we were talking about this the other day, there's a Digital Services Forum, and that's on a ServiceNow community. There's our YouTube channel. And then the third resource we have right now is the shared instance. If you need access to the shared instance, I'm going to demo from that today, so you'll see some of the stuff that's on it. But if you need access to that, the only way to get that right now is by email. Hopefully we'll create a service for that in the future so that I can just put you on as admin on the shared instance through an approval. But you'll see what I'm talking about in a little while, what that shared instance is. Just a little bit about the group before we go into the content for today. And this is, again, mostly for the people that are here for the first time. The idea behind the forum is that we want to help people with digital transformations. And we don't want to just do the regular stuff that always happens, or we don't want to demo products. There's a lot of places you can go for ServiceNow to demo products. But just how do we support that digital transformation? And mostly it's from the foundational perspective. Like, what are the foundations of digital service delivery? So a lot of times you won't come and you won't see a specific demo like an ITBM or CSM, right? We're really about that core that supports all of those different offerings on the platform. So our big mission here is to help members drive their own digital transformation, right? Through the education they get through our forum, be able to take that back to their organizations and use it to support their digital transformation. So there's a lot of shared work. Today, two of those examples I'm going to give you on how I'm going to share this work that I have. And it could be where we're giving you apps like I'm going to do today. It could be papers. UC Davis shared a paper last year on how to do a service design document, right? How they're using that and bringing it in and out of the product. So I'm part of the enterprise architecture team in the Americas. But our whole architecture team, so there's probably about 60 of us across the world, support this. And you'll be hearing from one of our architects. I think she's on today, Michelle. She'll be on one of our future calls. We're trying to get her set up so that we bring in more information from around the world instead of just local information like we had at the beginning. All right, so you're on a bi-weekly call, and that's basically the main way we communicate with our members is through this bi-weekly call we're having today. But on occasion, I think last year or the year before, we had a half-day workshop where we had like 90 people come on. We all built out CSDM structures, and then we came back to the group periodically throughout the half day and we shared what happened in our little breakout group. So those are pretty fun too. Sometimes we do those breakouts. Sometimes we meet at Knowledge when we get on site again. So we've had a couple of different content blocks at Knowledge that we delivered as a group. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into our content today. So this one, probably a lot of people that are building their digital service portfolios are probably scratching their head a little bit. How do I build a 700 node portfolio in 30 seconds? That takes a really long time to do. So I'm going to share a little.
Oh. Turn off your mic.
I don't know if that was a question or not. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these use cases and I'm going to show you a little bit. I'm going to demo it to show you how you can use it. But I'm also going to describe a little bit of how it's built, because some of you will see some of the components on here that are useful. And I want you to be able to go in and take that app apart and do different things. Like one of the actions in here you'll see that's pretty useful is parsing a spreadsheet. Right? So how does a ServiceNow service consume a spreadsheet and then build a structure from that spreadsheet? There we go. Thanks for muting. After that, I'm going to talk a little bit. I worked with one of our cities. I'm going to talk a little bit about Atlanta. A lot of times people say when they're using public services, right, because you have our employee services, or a lot of people are focused on employee service. A lot of people focus on shared services. But when you get to public services, there's this requirement to register a lot of times. But everybody doesn't want to register every time they need a service. So there's different approaches you can use to let people come in anonymously and still interact with ServiceNow in terms of submitting something. So I'm going to show you, we're actually going to go into their prod system and show you a little bit about the design on that. And then I'm going to share that with the group as well, so that if somebody does need to have anonymous access to public services, they will be able to do that. And then at the end, I want to talk a little bit about the structure. So when I talked about the 3 different areas we have today, right? We have the Digital Services Forum on ServiceNow Communities, YouTube channel. We have the shared instance. I want to add a 4th one today. And I want to talk a little bit about this on the GitHub repository. So we'll come back to that after these demos. So basically here, I'm looking for GitHub experts, because I'm surely not one of those. And if somebody in the community were able to step up for that and actually host our GitHub repository, that would be welcome. If not, we'll have to do it and link together private repositories like I'm going to show you today. All right, if any questions before I start, you can drop them in the chat, and then Charles or Rachel, if you can just let me know if there's something I should address in general, or if you guys can't pick that up. All right, so I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with this, but this is Studio. So I built a small app. It has a catalog item in it. And this is a build new service taxonomy catalog item. It has a workflow in it. And what this will do is let me import a taxonomy. So this build new service taxonomy is actually going to, I didn't realize how small this was. There we go. So this workflow that we use, it's going to actually build that service portfolio for me. So that's how I get there in 30 seconds, right? I basically submit a spreadsheet with my structure in there, just my business service structure right now. And then the workflow is going to build a taxonomy for me so that I get a digital portfolio out of it. And then what I had to build on the back, this workflow calls this action, which says, let me parse an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, the other part of this I'll come back to a little bit. After I build this, and I want to share it with all you, because you might want to take a spreadsheet, you might have your services in a spreadsheet, and you might say, well, instead of entering, I deal with states. Most states have between 700 and 1,200 services. Instead of entering these one by one or building really complex transformations, maybe I can just come in and use this application. All right, so build new service taxonomy is our catalog. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this thing is. And so if I go to the service directly, I just put this in my catalog, the default service portal. So all I need to know is demo for digital service forum. And then I'm going to upload my template file, right? So basically what this is an Excel spreadsheet that I can upload, and I have that in my downloads directory right now. So I just uploaded some things, and to adhere to the structure I talked about a few weeks ago, and this follows IT pretty closely, right? There's this market-facing section where it has a bunch of services in there. There's internal employee services. And then there's shared services. So these are services that people can use as building blocks in order to provide those, for other people to build either employee services or public services. Okay, and then there's another chunk here where we're putting our build tools inside of another folder. And so I'm going to import this spreadsheet, and I'm going to feed that into this taxonomy here. So I'm going to upload that one I just showed you. The other part on here is form example. Okay, so now we're building a new service portfolio called Demo for Digital Services Forum. And we're going to import all of those services into there. And you'll notice on the spreadsheet, there is a And if you guys have logins, right, the idea here is you can come in and use this same thing to build out your portfolio. But the idea here, there's a taxonomy node under this portfolio called demo for DSF. And then underneath that taxonomy node, there's a service. And underneath that service, there's going to be multiple service offerings, right? So Hunt and Fish in this case has a bunch of different service offerings. All right, so when we go ahead and we submit this request, oh, I got to upload my template file. Let me try that again. I was talking about it too much instead of form example services. So the validation works on the form. All right, so now it's waiting for approval, and I got 120 in there. So what I'll do is I'll go back into my requests and just approve that one. And you have to do this approval manually. I'll fix that so that we don't have to do it manually. But just to show you the process that the workflow is going through. This is 120 that just came in. So I'll just go ahead and approve this one. All right, now we're off and running with our workflow. And then what will happen here is that we should have, once that workflow runs, we should be able to see that we imported our Excel spreadsheet. And then we ran that build new taxonomy, should be approved now. And then we give it a few minutes there, and we should see that we have our portfolio in here.
It was in there, the demo for DSF.
Oh, it was in there? I just missed it. There it is. All right, so we're not going to have any metrics yet because we haven't run performance analytics. But the idea here is that we went in and we parsed the Excel spreadsheet. We brought in all the different things in there. And then underneath the public services, Hunt and Fish, and then you can see all the offerings underneath there that were in our spreadsheet. So there's ways to, I went through this in other demos. I'm not going to have time today, but in other ones where we actually start building the metrics out on this. But from here, once you import it, I didn't bring in owners yet, right? I didn't bring in all those people that could be brought in the spreadsheet. So you could modify my workflow to actually take other columns out of that spreadsheet. If I put the owner, the portfolio owner, or the service owner, you could actually do that with your build. So I'm gonna, like I said, we're gonna take a little peek at the workflows for that. But you'll also start getting on fishing and regulations, for example. I can now go into the details. And if you start mapping demands against fishing regulations, I'll now see all the demands that are coming in. I'll see all the projects that are started. Zoom out a little bit. If I go into the build phase, right, the build phase is now, if I just went in and associated one project or one epic with fishing regulations, it's now going to show up here. So you're providing that view out to the solution owner through digital portfolio management view. Okay, so that's just an example. A lot of times people are looking at this saying, wow, do I only manage? Like if I go back to that enterprise portfolio, am I only looking at ServiceNow services? And the answer is definitely not. Like especially with public services, when we go in, somebody else is probably going to be doing hunting and fishing, right? So what we're doing is with this one, we're just wrapping the support wrapper around it. We're able to launch all of our improvement initiatives around this. Right? So if we're on public hunting and we want to say, hey, I want to put it, or public hunting maps rather, I want to put a new demand against this, or I want to do an improvement initiative. Right? This is the idea for that solution owner. Usually, like this shouldn't be an IT person. This should be somebody that's out that is actually doing all the hunting services. They should be able to launch an improvement initiative or a new demand for a new feature on public hunting maps. And the same thing we come in at the hunt and fish level. There's that same level of, I want to do something across all the hunting and fishing services. Okay, so that's what it gives you the ability to start talking about it. You can do it in our sandbox instance, right? This is the one, if you email me, I'll give you admin access to it. So you come in and see what I did. But that's part of it. Any questions on that before we go? Is there anything in the chat, Charles or Rachel? Okay. Right, I want to give you a little bit of a peek at how this works. So if I go back to...
Sorry, John, yes, there is one in the chat. My mouse wasn't working there. It's from Jeff Aldrich, and it's a little bit tangential. So I'll just read it out here, and then I think it's maybe more of a people comment on it in chat. It says, tangential to this discussion, but something that we are embarking on when defining a service taxonomy, both business services and technical services, what industry resources are people using as a starting point? We are struggling a bit to define ours from scratch and would love to have examples that we could use or modify as needed for our enterprise.
Yeah, good question. The only go-to that we see all the time is APQC. APQC has some process structures, and they map pretty nicely to business service structures. And then if you're, depending on the industry, we have some taxonomies as well. So I know for higher education, for government, I just saw a really nice one on North Carolina's site. I used their capability structure to give my initial service structure. But those are the only ones I really know of. It's going to be very industry dependent though, especially once you get into those market facing services versus where the internal services is pretty steady. For the internal services, I have one more thing. We had a presenter on here about 1.5 years ago, and ServiceNow did a bunch of research on service taxonomies, and that is available in our share, where you can go see what they did, this P-card experiment to say, how does an organization classify their services? So that's another resource too. You'll find that on the Digital Services Forum community. So, I'll try to send something out too with some other resources on the forum. That's a good question. Right, any other ones? Okay.
That's it that I see.
Okay. All right, so let me show you a quick thing. So this studio, when I build the catalog item you saw, because I submitted the request, the workflow that picked up that catalog item once I approved it, I want to show you just a quick view of that, because we touched quite a few tables as we go through. So this is the workflow I defined. In the beginning, what it's going to do, it's going to take that name that you built out. So after it gets all the variables, it's going to scrape the variables off of that list. So it's getting the service portfolio name. And then it's also able to get the attachment that I created to it. Now, once it has that, it's going to go ahead and set up some flow variables. So it's going to take that name and put it in the portfolio name. So I'm using basically a variable. And then it's going to look up and it's going to say, is that portfolio already there? They already have a portfolio called, DSF example. And if it doesn't find it, it's going to build it. If it does find it, it's going to add an underscore at the end, right? Because it's a duplicate. And then it's going to try again. So it builds the portfolio. And then after that, it's going to build a taxonomy layer in that portfolio. So it's just going to call it service group. And that's the layer where all those, all the taxonomies go into. After it creates a taxonomy layer, it's going to go ahead and get that attachment, that Excel spreadsheet. And then when it runs the attachment, it's going to go ahead and I'm going to call an action here. So when it gets the attachment, it's going to parse Excel file. So this is a spoke that I created that will parse our specific Excel file. So you guys can use this for other things too. It's a really good template if you just want to feed in Excel into a catalog item. But what this will do is it's going to go ahead and it takes one input only. It's going to take that Excel file as an input. And then what the script step is going to do, it's going to parse out the node on there. So every node is basically a line in Excel. And then at the end, it's going to put an output out, and it's going to give, the output is basically going to be an array of those line items that have the taxonomy node, the service, and the service offering. And it's going to feed that structure, right? When I do the parse, it's going to feed that structure back to our workflow. So now this guy ripped apart the Excel file and the steps that I'm doing here. And after it went through that Excel file and parsed it, now we can go ahead and do operations on it. So I can create the taxonomy layer. And then for each of the items in the Excel file, I can go ahead and see if the taxonomy node is there. If the taxonomy node's there, I'm going to use it. If it's not there, I'm going to create it. And then if I do find it and there's one existing, I definitely want to use that one so I don't duplicate that taxonomy node. And then we have that for context, we have the taxonomy node that we're operating in. So now I can come down on the bottom, build my business service and add it to that taxonomy node. And then the same way as I go down, you'll see where I build the service offering and then add that to the service, right? So it's kind of that stack of things that we're adding out of the spreadsheet. So that's all the detail I wanted to give you on the workflow. There's just two pieces to it. So it's a pretty simple app. There's some complexity in the action in the workflow, but you guys won't have to deal with that. You'll just have to deal with these high level objects when you're using it. If you wanted to modify the workflow to add like a service owner on, you can do that pretty easily. Okay, so this app, how do we get to sharing it? That's the last piece I want to get to with you. So this app, you can't come and just take it off of the instance. Well, you could, if you know how to do that, you could take it off the instance. But I want to make it a little easier for you. I want you to be able to go ahead and get it in GitHub. Right? So what I can do here is I can say, go ahead and apply these changes to my GitHub. And all right, I was going to show you the repository configuration, but I basically have source code control set up. So what I can do now is I made some changes here today. So I'd be able to commit these changes. And that basically pushes all the stuff that I did in this workflow. It's going to push it up to GitHub. So this way anybody can get that version off of GitHub. All right, so I can include these changes and basically put some comments in there. And then this commits those files up to GitHub. So now what I did is I took all that configuration I did for this app, and then I pushed it out inside of an area in GitHub so that you guys can come and get it. And so in GitHub here, you'll see that I have this create digital portfolio from Excel. And I have some new, because I just submitted to it, right? So what I'd have to do is I'd have to say, okay, take this new stuff that John just built and add it to the main branch. And this way, that main branch, if you come in, once I do this merge, once you come in and you say, hey, I want to get that off of GitHub, now you can pull that app down into your instance. So A, the value in using it in our instance, in our shared instance, and then B, if you need to do this yourself, you can come up here and pull it down. So quick question here on how do I pull that down? So if you go into Studio, all right, this is your applications. And when you go to Studio, it's going to say, okay, what application do you want to work on? And what you're going to do is you're going to say, import that from source control. Now, what you'll be able to do is take that URL from my instance, right? So I can go up here and I could take, this is my GitHub. I can copy that. And then what I'll be able to do in Studio is I'll say, that's what I want to import. I want to pull that app into my instance. You'll need a credential. So there's some pretty simple examples for getting a credential there. And then you'll be able to import that. I already have it, so I'm not going to import it. So you'll be able to import that, work on it yourself. And then if you want to, you can make changes on your side and even push it back to our GitHub repo so that I could take, if somebody else wanted to add an Excel file with a user on it, we can have different branches on that. So the idea here for the forum would be to be able to do a bunch of these and be able to share them with everybody so that we get rid of a lot of the headaches, right? That's what we're here for. So that's that's one of the headaches that we can get rid of, is how do I import a spreadsheet across all those tables, right? So this will help you do that and at least build out that part of the common service data model, right? That sell consume part of the common service data model. All right, so hopefully I see a bunch of people creating their own portfolios here now because it's so easy. And then you'll be able to go ahead and operate on those. Any other questions? I want to pause again and make sure I'm not.
Yeah, we've got one on how does it deal with duplicates?
Yeah, good question. I covered that briefly, but I'll just go back through it again. Basically what it does is if you look at our portfolio, you'll see I had some duplicates in there. What it's going to do is add an underscore at the end until it's original. So through all my testing, when I kept screwing up, I was getting like 30 underscores under here because I was duplicating. But what it's doing is it's looking in the CMDB CI services table to make sure this way it gets, it's not a duplicate of any service. So even if we're putting this in the business service table, right, we want to go all the way back to the root of that, the base table, which is CMDB CI service, because we would still get a conflict even if we were putting it in the business table. So those underscores you see are because there's other ones in here called hunt and fish already. And it's the same thing on the portfolio. Like if there was another demo for DSF, yours would get an underscore if you ran that same job again.
There's another one, John, I think folks will want to fork it first and get it from their own GitHub ID.
Yep, you can, when you come up, and that's where I say I'm not a GitHub expert, but yeah, there is a way to go ahead and fork this. And I'll show you where I have. So I built this, there's this other one, the public service template. And I know a couple of people subscribe to that one. And in here, what I'll actually be able to do is this walks you through all the GitHub pieces. So this talks about creating an account. It talks about going in and yeah, there's like a README in there. It also talks about forking the repo before you go, so you're not loading it right from that one. So when you go in here, I have some configurations to do, make it public. So there's some instructions in here on how to do some of those things. Is that it, Charles? Or?
Yeah, I think everything else seems to be a comment as opposed to a question. So
okay,
if I missed you, please speak up.
All right, so let's switch off that one and go to the.
I'm sorry, John, this is Jeff. Can I just ask a quick question? When the version changes, how do you update it in your own studio? So let's say that you found that somebody fixed a couple bugs or it went up a whole major release. How do you resync? Do you just re-pull it down through the source control?
Yeah, they'd push it up and then you'd pull it back down. You'd have to pull down that branch again.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump back to all right, so that's a little bit about the components of that app. Like I said, it's only 3 components, right? But the action got a little detailed with parsing the Excel, but that was a cut and paste. Somebody else did most of that for me on the community, and I was just able to grab that code in and then parse that down. And then we did the demo, of course. The next piece I want to talk a little bit is about anonymous access. And some of you I know struggled with this because there's some things you can't do. Like if you give somebody a public form, it's pretty easy in ServiceNow if that public form is just like a PDF, right? I just want to come in here and there's no reference list to drop down. There's no attachments on it. I don't really have to interact with the system as I'm filling the form out. But usually you want to have a drop-down list, right? I want to have a reference list and I'll be able to pull these things out. So having anonymous, you're basically logging somebody in to the system as a shared user, but you want the behaviors of that logged in user to not be the same as a regular logged in user. So I'm going to show you these are really popular for 311 with cities. I did one in Santa Monica is using it. And then also the most recent one in Atlanta is a little bit different because we give you the option to either log in as a user, as a citizen of Atlanta, or go ahead and continue as that anonymous user. But like I said, we want to have some, if we do that, we want to have some different behaviors in the browser. So if I go into Atlanta 311, so this is their prod system. They just went live with this anonymous last week. And one of the problems that they had here with volume was they would do something, they would search for a service, right? And then in order to just say, go ahead and request pothole, what it would say is, actually, I'm gonna get out of here. Okay, let me go back and do that one more time. And this is a little bit about the front end of the service, right? Is the authentication piece. So pothole, and then I am not logged in, so I go request pothole. And now what it says is I can go ahead and register. And a lot of people are like, you know what, I'm not going to bother with this pothole or this streetlight or this graffiti report. I'm not going to bother with it if you're going to make me register. Just too much of a pain. So what I can do here is I can opt not to register right now or log in, but continue as guest is another option. And once I continue as guest, what it's going to do behind the scenes is log you in as this public guest user. Because we're logged in as public guest user, we're able to still use all of the reference features in our dropdowns. We're still able to do attachments because we do have an authenticated user on the system. But some things you'll see up here is we don't have a menu that says, look at my requests, right? Because I don't want to go back and show you every single public guest request that got filed. There's also some behavior changes in search. So if I go into search, certain search sources are not available to that user. So they're really restricted on the search sources that they can see, and then the access to different information they have. And so as a public guest, you have to change the behavior. Now, a couple of the discussions that happen around public guests is you're like, wow, that's really not good. So some security people are probably on here like, no way. So there's a lot of talk about when we do go in and request this, do we put CAPTCHA in front of it? Right? Do we put a little resistance there so people can't just start dumping things into the system? So those discussions have come up too. And if there ever is a kind of this place where people are creating a lot of tickets, we'll be able to do that. Also CAPTCHA at the form itself, right? That's another option that you can do with CSM. At this point, we wanted to make as little friction as possible for the citizens. So we just, let people come in and choose anonymous as the option. A couple of the other things in here, like on Santa Monica, one of the things that we're able to do is we do it a little bit different in Santa Monica because we do log people in as public guests immediately. Like we don't give them the option to register. And then the other thing we do in Santa Monica is we learn their location. So a couple of things that about me, even though I'm a public guest, is if I put in my first name, last name, and email address, I can actually create a record so that I hold your email address. This way, if you send me other emails later, right, I'm basically know that you submitted a case under that email already. So we do a little bit different for public access in Santa Monica than we do Atlanta, but it's the same idea. The map is in here. We haven't done that in Atlanta yet, but this is an Esri plugin that we used here that I demoed before. And that's another shared piece that's in that GitHub bucket is that Esri piece. So in that template, in that GitHub repository, there's a whole bunch of things that I built for the community inside this public service template. And one of those things in there is that Esri Map. So if you went down here, the anonymous user that I showed you here, there's some code in there for that. There's some code in there for public portal, creating public forums. There's some things in here for the map. So it'll tell you how to create that Esri map. And then there's a standalone for that as well. All right. I'll pause again for any questions on anonymous access. And anybody struggling with that right now? All right.
There's a question here. Could you create a mobile version of the CAD item that auto derives your location using your phone's GPS?
You can, and we've done that. So if you go download the Santa Monica mobile app, we've done that. And it's actually in the form. It's going to render it, but it's using, instead of using Esri, it's using the native phone map interface. So it's a lot easier to do that on a native mobile app. If you're just using the browser on your phone, it's going to use the same thing and it scales and everything. But if you're using native mobile through our native mobile app API, then you would probably use the native maps on mobile. And so if you do go into the store, you'll see the app we built for Santa Monica, and that'll give you an example of how the map goes there. So they're kind of walking you through a mobile experience. It's a little different than this one. So they do it screen by screen. They ask you to pick your location first, and then after you pick your location, then it asks you what the problem is. So there's this kind of more of a process-driven mobile experience than this web experience I'm showing you here. So there's kind of two answers to that, right? Depending on native mobile or mobile web. On mobile web, it does still use the location service on your phone because that's a browser function. It's not a mobile function. Okay.
And then there's a follow-up. It means that installing the mobile app, you have to give consent to use the mobile phone GPS, right?
Yes. Yeah. And the other thing is you have to build it. Like ServiceNow doesn't have a mobile app for citizens. So the one for Santa Monica we built on React Mobile. So it's a React app, and it's using basically three interfaces are dumping in Santa Monica. So it's our knowledge, it's our case management, all of the records that go back to it are from ServiceNow, and then there's an outside CMS that we're using. So sometimes people want to use ServiceNow as the CMS for that mobile app, and other times they might want to use something that they've been using all along. So they did have an existing CMS, so we didn't use that from ServiceNow. Pretty cool app. If you get a chance, go check it out. Santa Monica. I think that just look up Santa Monica in the Play Store, you'll find it.
Can you put the URL in the chat, please?
For the mobile app?
No, for that site.
Oh, for this one? For that one, Lou?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, that's the one where you're not going to see the continue as public because it's not giving you a choice. And then the Atlanta one is the one where you have the choice to log in or create an account or continue as public, continue as guest.
Yeah, I noticed with Google Chrome, it popped up, know your location allower block.
Yep. Yep. So if you let the browser know your that web page, basically you're granting that web page permission for that service. Okay, last piece here. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about, is there any GitHub experts in the group? Because one of the things I'd like to do is, like I said, have this as a fourth asset area for the forum. So that instead of, like, I can go and put a link to this app on our forum, but then it kind of gets buried, right? As we go down that blog post where people won't be able to find out how to build this portfolio or how to get to that app. What it'd be nice is to have a GitHub repository that's not John Spurko, but it's Digital Services Forum GitHub repo. And then allow other people in the group to submit to that repo. So if there's anybody that would be able to help me with that or actually take that on and demo it on the call one day, I think that would be a huge asset for us to have, especially as we get into like next year, Rachel talked about wanting to get more into some industry specific content, like maybe doing a little segment on energy and utilities, or a little segment on healthcare, especially as we get it. It'd be nice to have the repo and actually, as we mature, be able to say, okay, here's some healthcare specific apps that you can import. So if anybody does have expertise there, or knows somebody that does, that would be able to lend a hand, let me know. I'm not willing to take that on myself because I don't know enough about GitHub. Like, I know about forking a repo and doing that merge, but I know there's a ton of stuff to know about it, and how to manage like a group like that would not be in my wheelhouse of knowledge. All right. Any other questions in there? Did I clear all those out? And if you're more comfortable, if you guys have any questions and want to come off mute, feel free to do that as well. All right. So you know where to get this. You know where to get this if you want to put it on your instance, or if you want to use it centrally, you can try those out on the Sandbox instance. All right, let's look at the agenda a little bit. Last week on the call, there was a lot of people that commented about some of the content for the next few meetings. We're only staying 2 out in front. We're trying to get to like the content, at least planning 4 meetings out in front so that people have an idea of the agenda. And like this today was pretty technical, right? But if other times we're going to be talking about like financial management on these services. So there's going to be different, we know the audience is going to swing depending on what the content is. We're also splitting it up now. So different ones of us, Rod's on today, Charles is on today, Rachel's on today. I think Jason was out today, but we're basically running these meetings so that we have access to different people. Like a lot of times I bring my customers in that I work directly. So over the next few weeks, you'll see where we're staging meetings where different people are owning the content. So if we look here, these are our attendees, and we have a mixture of ServiceNow and other people on here. This is what 3 contributions is. Actually, I presented 2 contributions. I changed that because of time. I have one other one that I could show you, but that's basically today. The one we talked about last week, which I'm really looking forward to this one, is we're going to bring a few people that are CSDM implementers, and we're going to get them. I don't know if it's going to be a panel or a couple of people that have done this in the field. I specifically looked with Jason. We looked for people that really got their hands dirty with this. So they had some really messy business service tables and service offerings. So they had to unwind all that stuff, right? It wasn't just like this pristine environment like I demoed today where you can just start dumping stuff into the tables. It's like, first I got to get some type of baseline established with what we've done over the last 8 years in the instance. So that'll be a really good one. And then after that, we're going to have more of an EA forum. We have a couple new EAs on our team, and Michelle's on the call today. I think we got her. I don't know if she's available yet. We did get confirmation from Amanda that she'll be able to speak.
I'm here.
Hey, Michelle. I don't know if that time's good for you. So I tried to get an email, but it was late your time when I sent it out.
So which week, where are you?
October 27th.
October 27th. So yeah, that's good for me.
Good deal. And the thing with like some of us on the team haven't been EAs before, and both Michelle and Amanda have been enterprise architects. So I asked for some perspectives on CSDM, and Amanda's fairly new to CSDM, but Michelle has been around it for a long time. And the other thing, Michelle, I think will be good for you is like the CSDM is our example to the industry standards being determined outside of ServiceNow, right? So, so talking a little bit about, I know you have a huge background on that and even authored some of the stuff that feeds the CSDM futures. So that, I think that's going to be an awesome meeting too.
Yes, I'll be mapping the CSDM into Archimate and looking how we can start using enterprise architecture tools alongside the Now platform as well. So that's always an interesting thing to do.
Yeah, it's a lot deeper than the little demo I did here, dumping stuff into tables. So it's a lot of the planning behind that. And then Charles is putting some content together, so we'll have that block filled in next week. But yeah, if you do, you can contact any of us. You don't have to look for, hey, I want to do something that week. But we're definitely looking for customers to come in and talk on any one of these. If you want to come into an existing one that we have on here, let me know. And if you want your own section, we definitely want you to come in. So we'll be reaching out to some people, like I do on occasion. I say, hey, Lou, come in and speak. Or a couple of times we had people speak about financials. We brought people in for that. So we do have specialists in the area, but we're definitely looking for more people that are practitioners out in the field actually doing this to come up. Does anybody have an idea for a concept or content that they'd like to kick around today on the call? We have a little bit of time. Okay. Yeah, because the last one we had present back here was Cassandra. So if anybody has any even if you want to bring stuff that's, that you're having trouble with, we don't need a polished demo to come out of this. A lot of times my demos break on these calls, right? I'm like, oh yeah, here's where I'm stuck. Right? So that's what the forum is more about than doing this really pretty polished presentation. We want to see everything. We want to see where people are running into problems.
Well, and I was going to throw this out here, and I will just, you see my name at the bottom of the thing. I'm Charles Bartley, and my topic's still to be determined, and I've got some ideas I'm working over. If you've got an interesting problem that you're working on and you want to do a tag team on it, here's how we are thinking about approaching this problem, I'd love to collaborate with you and try and work through some things. Might turn into a really interesting discussion.
Cool. Yeah, we did one a few weeks ago where we brought in one of our, actually, there was one customer that spoke after Cassandra was Esri is a partner and a customer of ServiceNow. So they talked a little bit here. And we have a little bit of time. I want to show you one more thing before we adjourn today is there is all these meetings, just like this one we did today, are going to be on our YouTube playlist. So I also post the video in our forum, so you'll be able to get to it from anywhere. But all these past meetings that you see on there, they're available through this playlist. So I'll put this playlist in there, and so the one this meeting today that we're on will be on here within the next 2 days. I'll just paste that out there because I know a lot of you have it, but for those of you that are new, that'll be a good link to bookmark. Any other questions, ideas?
John, this is Alan Prohaska.
Alan?
Hey, this may be farther down the back on the maturity curve, but we're struggling with service definition. Once a strategy was announced, okay, we're going to move towards services, then immediately every organization develops their own list of services, and the granularity is all over the map. And generally what we see is that everybody looks at the important things that they do, and they put that on a line, and then they write service after it. And so everybody makes their own services. They don't agree. Meshing them is difficult, and we are in a bit of a, I guess you could call it a quagmire. And I'd be interested if I see this as probably mostly an org change management issue rather than one that's strictly technical, definitional.
Yeah.
But breaking the service paranoia logjam is that everybody has to have their stuff called a service in order to be important, in order so that they'll retain their job. That's the mindset that we face, and we need to loosen that knot.
Are they actually dumping stuff into the services table? Is it open to people to do that?
It's off platform. We haven't yet gotten it onto the platform, and so there's spreadsheets around, in various repositories, various SharePoint sites.
Okay, yeah, a lot of that does get back to governance, and we had a couple conversations on that. Do you have a consolidated pipeline of things coming in terms of building out those services, or
No,
is everybody just?
No, we've got lots of pipelines, just about everyone that you could imagine.
Yeah, because I think that's the first part of the governance, is trying to get it into a single choke point so that you can get your arms around it, and then get some type of architect's eyes on it before it lands in the repo.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the short answer that we talked about today. So we talked about that a little bit, kind of this function as we come through. And I did a little demo on that in a section we talked about governance, where we actually fire off tasks every time a demand comes in. We fire off tasks so there's visibility to the EA team. But there's a lot of other pieces to that. The other part we talked about that'll be useful for that is one of Jason's sessions, where he talked about some governance, the big G word. Were you on that one?
It sounds familiar. What we're really stuck on is what is a service, and we can't get agreement on that.
Got it. Yeah. So the service definitions and the principles around how to.
The mechanics, like many things, once you have agreement on the models, the mechanics of building them become less difficult. But if there isn't agreement on what is a service, that's where we're stuck right now. And so everybody defines their own version, and they don't agree.
Yeah, one of the
Semantics.
Semantics.
Yeah, one of the big pieces in here that Jason talked about is having a couple of these roles filled, not dedicated people, right? But there's definitely something around the data management.
Okay.
Right, the master data management part of that is a big chunk of it, and then also being able to do ongoing validation of a service, just like you would an app, right? So we should use the data validation function on the platform to make sure we're asking people, is all this stuff filled in there? So they come back to the record periodically to update anything. So once you have that owner assigned, you can assign them tasks to manage their own data. But I think that structure in the beginning, we can't have people going crazy without naming conventions or anything like that, or else you end up with a big mess, especially when you try to put it in a portfolio.
Okay.
Yeah. So these roles, there's actually these presentations that Jason shared during this video here are in this link in the, so if you don't have those already.
I'll take a look at those again.
Yeah, but it talks to you about how you structure and how you get that person involved in ongoing planning. And then the one I did a little separate is how you get that architecture function in the pipeline piece.
Right.
The other part that we're talking about a little bit too, and
it looks like one person may have multiple roles, and we do see some combinations.
Oops.
Executive sponsors are usually.
I thought Jason was talking on the meeting. I didn't realize I clicked the button. Any other questions, or else I give you guys some 5 minutes back?
2 raised hands. Brent.
Yeah, this is Brent Knipfer. I'd like to see if it was discussed. I'm new to the meeting today, but watched a few of the YouTube forums, and thanks for being able to join. I'm interested in seeing service, a little bit more about the CSDM product views, and I'm looking at sort of the Venn diagram for APM, CSDM, and SPM. I think the approach of the product view is a good start on docs.servicenow.com, but a bit more of a deep dive, into that journey. So I've seen, have experience implementing service portfolio management and application portfolio management, but this digital portfolio management, I appreciated the view too. I think the great approach is it's a data workbench, and it just gets richer and richer with the data. I think that's a good mindset, but I think a double click discussion of that cross section of with a focus on who are the primary stakeholders that have to have the budget and consume this to make it effective in an organization.
Yeah. And have you done the fundamentals, because they give you some really good documents in there too?
CSDM fundamentals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done, but back to when the 2.0, 3.0, desperately wondering why 4.0 is not being formalized. It's been sitting for a year in draft.
Yeah, the thing is, it's in Tokyo Docs. So if you go in Tokyo Docs, all the pictures are 4.0. So
Yeah, but I mean, the white paper, I don't know, we're supposed to just say, the white PDF is just a draft and you use docs. I mean, there's been no sort of communication around the next step in the journey of documentation.
Yeah, that draft 2 of the docs of the PDF that was shared on the community is consistent with what's in the Tokyo documentation. But it's still called draft, to your point. So that's not real good.
I just, you think draft sits for a month or something, 3 months maybe for a company as big as ServiceNow, and then at some point you got to say it's the real thing.
Yeah.
And the other piece is what exactly has been implemented into the products, the various pieces of the platform. Yes, the definition might be out there and it might go from draft to production, but what's actually in use already and when's it coming?
Yeah, that's a big part of, I think, why it took so long to get it out was there's a lot of lifecycle stuff that's in the model that's not being used by the products yet. So I think that was a lot of the hesitancy there, right? That new quadrant that's the lifecycle quadrants. The product teams aren't leveraging those pieces yet. So
that's why I wanted to move sort of to the pragmatic, which is I assume these product views are fairly mature, and I think they are. I've implemented SPM, Service Portfolio Management, APM multiple times, so I think it's there, and that's why I think it's probably good timing for this kind of audience. We could have a pretty good discussion around service portfolio management, application portfolio management, and digital portfolio management, talking about the pragmatic journeys. In my experience is there's not an infinite number of patterns that people see. 2 or 3, and everyone's going to go down one of those paths.
Absolutely, yeah. Yep. So the other part of that too is getting out in front of it. We do have forward-looking things on here, and I know some of you just started today, but if you go back to that YouTube channel, we got a little bit of insight into like version 5 and 6 of CSDM from Mark when he came in during this one, the IT operating models of tomorrow. So he talked about digital products and what's coming in 5 and 6. And he talked a little bit too about the product teams being behind in adopting those lifecycle stages. So this is Mark talking a little bit about that back a couple months ago, but it's still pretty relevant. We haven't released CSDM 5 though, so he's talking a little bit about all the new pieces in here.
Hey John, I didn't think there was going to be a 5.
Are we skipping 5?
I think last I read was 4. Once it's formalized, will kind of be the end of the effort on the work. I mean, there might be a 5 in the future as things evolve, but it's not a case of they've got 5 planned. Which they go back to the comments before. That might be why 4 is being delayed in draft a little bit.
I didn't know that.
There's no 5 on the horizon. Yeah.
Okay.
Clearly, we do not need an hour meeting to fill out this fucking.
Hey, John, Bill Berry here real quick before we jump off.
Hey, Bill.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, on that topic that came up about what is a service, I would love to see us have, 20 minutes or even a half an hour on the agenda for a roundtable discussion with those that are interested, because it gets even more complicated when you try to reconcile the difference between a service and a capability. Because you mentioned APQC, but we use APQC as capabilities.
Yeah,
those are very structured, level 4 and beyond is, processes, and they all make complete sense. But services kind of came into play after the notion of capabilities hierarchies, and it's kind of creates a problem. So I'd love to see that as a topic of discussion. And I know that I'd be an active panelist on that if we wanted to do like 20 or 30-minute roundtable. Yeah, and the other thing that would be a good topic there, Bill, would be product portfolios versus service portfolios. Absolutely, yeah. Product, I guess the intersection of product, service, and capabilities, because it really, and looking at it from a business perspective versus a technical perspective, i.e., am I looking upward or downward? Yeah. So I imagine Michelle will talk about that a little bit. That's kind of in her wheelhouse, but we'll also we'll put it on the agenda there in the forum. We're talking a little bit about new content, so I think that's a really good one. Very cool. I'm there. That core service definition. I wonder too, in trials and tribulations, if that's going to be a
point of discussion too, is what are the real services? Like, how do we even start with that?
This is Brent. I think if you look at some of the idle for IT, that stuff's been out there a long time. There are service definition templates, you know, give you plenty, more than enough content. The problem is, you know, I think it has to get back to the funding, right? If someone isn't willing to pay for a service and sign up for it, then it can't be a service. And this is where you get a lot of disconnect. People want a lot of things, but if no one is willing to understand what the cost of that is and pay for it, then it can't be a service.
Yeah. Oops. Sorry, guys. I got to drop. I didn't realize we're over. Good discussions. I'll definitely get that on the agenda for us so we can have a roundtable. Maybe it's in the trials and tribulations. Maybe we just do that in the next meeting, Jason. All right. Thank you, everybody. Good discussion today. Appreciate it.